You've brought up that you've discussed this on your own podcast, and this is obviously a popular, which is alcohol consumption. Now, typically, because you talked about a couple days a week, someone having a couple of drinks. In a typical week, there's about 3 days where he'll have, 6 to 8 drinks, and then 3 days where we're talking about usually 12 to 18 drinks, right?
Oh my goodness.
Is there any side effects with that? Anything happening?
There's a name for it. It's called alcohol use disorder. But a name alone doesn't tell the whole story. Bert, listen, we love you. I've never met you in person, but the world loves you. Like, don't need it. No, but I think so. Alcohol, short list, pro-cancer, neurodegenerative. It's a poison, right? It's a poison. It works to shift people's conscious states because it's a poison. Yeah. Now, it's true there's some genetic variation depending on how much alcohol dehydrogenase, the enzyme that metabolizes alcohol, how much people make. Indeed, some people have a greater tolerance or can handle things. Certain cultures, they make so little of alcohol dehydrogenase, they have one drink or half a drink, it's like poison. They turn bright red and they feel sick, like they don't feel good. Other cultures, based on genetic variation, they can drink far more. Among humans, about 8% have some genetic variant that leads to increases in dopamine when they drink alcohol.
It's gotta be.
I had an ex-girlfriend like this who, could just drink and have the best time, and the next day is just fine. It's like the Don Draper phenomenon. Remember in that show, like he would just tie one on, he's like staggering back in the office. The next thing you know, he's just all ching. Yeah. He's all dialed in. Now, of course, that's a TV show.
Sure.
But the character was representing something that about 8% of people have, which is that they drink alcohol and they don't just sober up quickly. It's exciting to them, the anticipation. It's not just the circumstances. The alcohol really does seem to trigger the dopamine circuit. Whereas for most people, it triggers other circuits primarily, mainly shutting down of the forebrain so that you're kind of not as inhibited, as would be the simplest way to put it. You're not adjusting your rule sets. This can be a problem. I think what we should do is image your brain and Bert's brain. Okay. And what you're going to see, but what you don't want to end up with is the Homer Simpson thing, right? With the little brain inside the big skull. And that's essentially what alcohol does over time. And then what happens is people end up on repeat of the same 5 or 10 stories and circuits. You ever been around somebody who's been a long time drinker? Yeah. They just kind of become the old story over and over again. How early did Bert start drinking? How young?
I don't know. I know he was having, he was partying some in high school. In college, he was turned all the way up. So I'll say, to be safe, probably like 17, 18,
Yeah, there is very good evidence. If a kid starts drinking early, like 14, 15, the probability of them becoming a severe alcoholic is extremely high, independent of their genetics and independent of anything else. So how early people start drinking a lot.
I don't know if he was drinking at that age. I really don't know.
Let's hope not. I mean, really, 2 drinks per week would be the cutoff. I'd love to see Bert go sober, completely sober, and focus on other things. Not because I need to see that for my own, feelings of self-worth and well-being and happiness, but because I think, obviously his neural circuits work incredibly well in the presence of alcohol. They probably work even better.
And he does this. He does the thing that I don't even know if you knew this, but you mentioned, like, earlier in the podcast, you mentioned, if somebody drinks like this, you have to do certain things to offset.
Exercise more.
So he exercises actually a lot, more than people would.
Even on tour.
Even on tour, when he's home, even on tour, trainer with him on the road. I mean, he's running, he's lifting, he's active. He's a physically active guy. Yeah. And even the morning after the 10 drinks, active.
Yeah, and people will throw out things like, my grandmother had like a gimlet of vodka or a half a pint of whiskey and she lived to be 100. Yeah, there are outliers. Sure. But for most people who are drinking that much and carrying some extra weight, they're gonna die young. Now, how young? I don't know. I mean, some people have more vigor and they can go into their 70s and 80s. Yeah. But it's generally not a pretty picture. Yeah. As you get out into your 60s, 70s, 80s, it's really not. Yeah. And so, I'm not, I didn't even attend the health classes in high school, let alone am I going to try and stand here and be like, I'm the health professor. I actually didn't set out to tell people that alcohol is bad or that cannabis can be good or bad. That's how I feel about it, depending on the person and the context, or that nicotine can be good or bad, depending on how it's brought into the body and the context and the age of the person. I'm just trying to give people the knowledge so they can make decisions for themselves. I always say, do what you want, but know what you're doing. And I think it would be great if he would cut back. Also, he did sober October, so it's obvious that
he can do it.
Did he fall off?
No.
Okay, so it's clear that he could do it. I think that people who drink a lot and are high performers, who then make an active decision for themselves to go sober, do an incredible their work just flourishes.
Yeah.
Also, I will say this, I'm not in AA or NA.